morning of March 23, 2026, the Primorsk oil terminal was doing what it always does, loading tankers. 1 million barrels of Urals crude per day, moving through Baltic water, feeding the machine. Then the loading stopped, not because of a storm, not because of a mechanical failure. Rustem Umerov, Ukraine's Minister of Defense, had authorized a strike package that reached the Baltic coast, and in a single operational window, Ukrainian drones halted loading operations at Primorsk and Ust-Luga for several days, severing approximately half of the Baltic's total crude export flow. 3 days later, on March 26, a second strike hit the Kirishi Refinery, the KINEF facility operated by Surgutneftegaz, which processes 350,000 barrels per day, roughly 7% of Russia's entire domestic refining capacity. 2 targets, 2 dates. The math was surgical. Taken together, the Primorsk halt and the Ust-Luga strike disrupted approximately 40% of Russia's total seaborne crude export capacity. Not a percentage point on a quarterly earnings call, but the moment a war economy's main artery stopped pumping. The Baltic Sea, which had functioned for years as Russia's most reliable export corridor, became across those March strike operations a liability, a bottleneck, a vulnerability that satellite imagery confirmed and Port Authority data could not conceal. The corridor closed. What makes this moment a case study rather than a headline is the instrument that caused it. These were not cruise missiles. They were not carrier-launched strike packages requiring years of procurement and billions in defense appropriations. They were drones, low-cost, expendable, and manufactured at a cost structure that traditional defense was never built to fight. The Primorsk terminal, built to withstand geopolitical pressure, market volatility, and Western sanctions, was not built to survive this. No one's was. The 40% disruption figure is not a battlefield statistic. It is a financial audit result. The attackers' cost approached zero. The defenders did not. In the first week of March 2026, before the Baltic terminals went quiet, the oil market had already started screaming. Brent crude climbed from approximately $70 per barrel in late February to peaks above $100, an approximately 50% surge driven not by an actual supply cut, but by the perceived risk of closure in the Strait of Hormuz. Not a blockade, not a shot fired, a perception. Scott Bessent, Secretary of the Treasury, was watching a market detach from reality. Not from supply, from fear. That is a different kind of fiscal emergency, and it does not appear in any procurement manual. That fear has a manufacturer, Lockheed Martin's Patriot PAC-3 MSE Interceptor, the Western world's primary answer to ballistic and cruise missile threats, is currently scaling toward a production goal of roughly 2,000 units per year, approximately 167 missiles per month. That number sounds large until you place it against the rate of consumption in active Middle Eastern escalation scenarios, where a single sustained engagement can exhaust months of production in days. The supply line is not keeping pace. The DoD briefings confirm it. The math does not require interpretation. The arsenal is losing. Here is the number that rewrites the defense budget conversation. A single Patriot PAC-3 MSE interceptor costs between $4 million and $6 million per round. The Iranian Shahed suicide drone it is being fired at costs approximately $30,000. That financial asymmetry, approximately 130 to 1, means that for every dollar the attacker spends launching a drone, the defender spends $130 destroying it. Sustain that ratio across any prolonged engagement, And the Patriot system is not a defense solution. It is a controlled bankruptcy procedure. Controlled until it isn't. This is the opening that Ukraine's defense industry identified, the one that the Baltic disruption described earlier only made more visible. Ukraine's Sting interceptor drone, designed specifically to destroy Shahed-type suicide drones before they reach Patriot engagement range, carries an estimated unit cost of $2,100 to $2,500. Not $4 million, not $6 million. A figure that sits so far below the Patriot's cost floor that it does not compete in the same financial category. The Sting is not a cheaper missile. It is a different doctrine, one that answers the 130-to-1 trap by refusing to play the game at Patriot's price point. That doctrine now has a market, and the market is not in Europe. On March 26, 2026, the same date the Kirishi Refinery burned, Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, landed in Jeddah and signed a bilateral defense cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia, later announced publicly on March 27th. The agreement focuses on counter-drone technology and air defense integration. No fanfare, no summit declaration. A working document, signed in a city that has spent the last 2 years watching Iranian drones cross its airspace and detonate inside its infrastructure. The Saudis did not need a sales pitch. They needed someone who had already fought this war and survived it. And Ukraine had just demonstrated, over the Baltic, exactly what that survival looks like. The agreement did not arrive alone. Approximately 200 Ukrainian military and electronic warfare specialists are currently deployed or en route to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. Not as advisors in the traditional diplomatic sense, but as live combat instructors, carrying operational knowledge that no training manual contains. These are people who have spent years inside the actual engagement loop, identifying Shahed flight profiles, calibrating electronic countermeasures against real incoming threats, making the split-second cost decisions that the 130-to-1 trap described earlier forces on every air defense commander. That knowledge is now a transferable asset. Ukraine is not asking for charity. It is selling something the Gulf cannot manufacture from scratch. Ukraine is open for business. While the agreement was being signed in Jeddah, Russia's Ministry of Finance was running a different set of numbers. The Minfin projects a 2026 budget shortfall of up to approximately $14 to $18 billion USD across some internal scenarios, a figure driven by two simultaneous pressures: sustained disruptions to energy exports and the accelerating cost of military spending that shows no ceiling. These are not sanctions projections. These are the Kremlin's own risk range calculations, published by minfin.ru and government-linked sources. The institution that funds the war is now recording, in its own accounting language, the rate at which the war is consuming the fund. The shortfall is not a forecast of defeat. It is Russia's own accountants documenting the cost of a war they cannot stop paying for, line by line. Here is where the three threads converge. The Baltic disruption described earlier, the cost trap described earlier, and the Jeddah agreement signed on March 26th. Ukraine did not simply strike two Russian energy facilities and walk away. It struck them, documented the results, and signed a defense cooperation agreement in Jeddah on the same date as the second strike. The 130-to-1 ratio that is bankrupting Western air defense procurement is the same ratio that makes Ukraine's Sting doctrine commercially viable in the Gulf. And the Russian Ministry of Finance's projected shortfall of $14 billion to $18 billion is the arithmetic confirmation that the attacker's low-cost model is working, not just tactically, but fiscally. The war has a new business model. Minfin's own projections confirm it is already working.